Hey guys, welcome back to the lore book. I know it's been a very long time, too long in fact, and I apologize for the wait on it, but I'm back. I got an episode, I'm here. Before we get into this video, make sure to subscribe, of course, if you want to see more videos, and especially if you want to see the next episode as soon as possible. I'd rather get it out sooner than later, and I hope I get some more support to kind of push me towards that, But anyway, today we're covering a story that I think is honestly a little bit comedic in a pretty dark way, but there's some aspects of it that I find pretty funny. So today we're talking about the tale of Grady Stiles and his family, which is this tale of oddities and blood, as I like to say. Born in Pittsburgh in 1937, Grady Stiles Jr. suffered from a rare condition known as ectrodactyly. The condition is a birth defect that causes the hands and feet to appear claw-like and often renders the legs useless in some cases. It's passed down hereditarily and was passed through Stiles' family for centuries, all the way down to his own children. Grady's family capitalized off of their disability and started a circus all the way back in the 1800s. They quickly grew their family, producing more and more children with the same condition, ectrodactyly, and became known as the lobster family. And they quickly became a carnival staple throughout the 1800s and early 1900s. However, Grady would give his family a permanent dark stain on their legacy as he turned into an abuser and a murderer. His case of ectrodactyly was particularly severe. He couldn't walk because his legs were also affected by the condition, like I said before. And ectrodactyly, it turns your hands and your feet into lobster claws, pretty much. And so it affected his entire body, almost. And so his legs were shrunken and kind of disfigured, and so he couldn't use them. For most of his life, he used a wheelchair, but would often choose to get around using just his hands to crawl along the ground, which resulted in him gaining a tremendous amount of upper body strength as he grew up. As he grew up, he traveled with his family in the circus, and he was a circus member from birth, pretty much. Which, when he got older, it was no surprise when he fell in love with a fellow circus staff member named Mary Teresa. She was a runaway who joined the circus as a teenager, and eventually the two fell in love and they got married. And after they got married, they had 2 kids. From my information, neither of which had ectrodactyly. However, after he married, he turned to drinking and became an alcoholic, which caused him to become increasingly violent and abusive towards his wife and 2 daughters. His incredible upper body strength made him incredibly dangerous in these situations, especially combined with his drunken rage that he would often fall into. And he would often use his claw-like hands to choke his wife during particularly intense arguments, which also happened quite often. Eventually, his eldest daughter, Donna, fell in love with a man who Grady did not approve of in the slightest, and this would prove to be the catalyst for the stain of blood that Grady would put on his name. On the eve of his daughter's wedding, Stiles invited the young man, her fiancé, into his home, and disguised by the offer of his blessing for the wedding, Grady's intentions were much more violent. When his daughter's fiance arrived, he was met by the barrel of a shotgun at the door. Grady shot him and killed him in cold blood. He quickly went to trial and pled guilty, and he had no remorse for the action that he committed. He admitted to it openly, and he didn't care. He didn't like the guy, so he shot him. But because of his condition, they were unable to put him in prison because the prisons weren't properly equipped to deal with disabilities at the time, especially not like intense birth defects like extradactyly is. And by law, it would have been considered cruel and unusual punishment to even think about locking him up in a cell. So he just got off with 15 years probation and house arrest and returned home with little punishment. He just admitted to murdering a guy in cold blood, and he just gets away because he has a disability that it makes it so it's cruel to put him in a prison. I don't think he should have gotten away, but by the time of the trial, Mary had divorced him, rightfully so, and he quickly remarried and had 2 more kids, of which were also subject to his drunken rage and abusive tendencies. Eventually, his second wife divorced him, obviously enough, and going back a little bit, after his and Mary's divorce, Mary left him and remarried as well to a man named Harry Glenn Newman, who at the time was coined the smallest man in the world. And together they had a son, Harry Glenn Newman Jr. Now here is where it starts to get a little comical to me. This guy that can barely use his fingers killed his daughter's fiance with a shotgun somehow, and goes and remarries after his wife divorces him, and then she leaves him for the world's smallest man. She left the lobster man for the smallest man, and I just find that hilarious. And I don't know if they have any other kids besides Harry Glenn Newman Jr., but from what I know, it's likely that they did, but I couldn't find any information on them having any more children together. After Grady's second wife left him, he managed to give up drinking somehow, and for some unknown reason, Mary returned to him, which quickly ruined his sobriety. I don't know why she left the smallest man to go back to the one that literally beat her and beat their children and killed her daughter's fiance. Seems nuts to me, but all to her, I guess. As reported by his family, he supposedly became even more violent and abusive than he was before, and that was partially because he went back to drinking, of course, and he felt like he was kind of above the law because he learned that he couldn't be imprisoned, and so he pushed the limits and became even more abusive. And this is what drove Mary to her breaking point. So, from what I researched, there are 2 different conflicting stories that I could find. One, according to Grady's son, Grady Stiles III, Mary's son, Harry Glenn Newman Jr., overheard Mary saying something needs to be done after an argument. It was a particularly intense argument again, and he supposedly went to the neighbor's house and repeated those words to the neighbor, which led the neighbor to enter the home and kill Grady. However, the other side, which was the one taken by the court, states that Mary and Harry hired a 17-year-old circus performer named Chris Wyant for $1,500, $1,500, to go and kill Stiles while he sat on his recliner watching TV and smoking a cigarette. So as he's sitting there watching TV, just enjoying himself, Chris entered the home and snuck up behind him, point blank range, and fired 2 shots to the back of his head, killing Stiles instantly, of course. Now, Wyant was charged later with second-degree murder and sentenced to 27 years in prison. And Mary, convicted of first-degree murder, only served 12 years. Grady was severely disliked by everyone around him, apparently so much so that when he died and they went to bury him, only 10 people showed up to his funeral. And no one was willing to carry his casket at all. Which shows to the kind of man he was. Like, how awful do you have to be that only 10 people show up to your funeral? And like even all of his living relatives pretty much were involved in this case with him, and most of them were in prison when he died because they plotted to kill him. So his own family plotted to kill him, and then he only has 10 people show up to his funeral. Like, that's just sad. That is sad. And so Grady's story ended in tragedy for everyone involved and left a permanent stain on his name forever. If you look him up, he's known as the Lobster Boy, from circus performer to murderer. Like he was not a good person, I guess. And from everything I read, he was just an angry, drunk man with a disability. But the biggest part, like I said before, why I find it like darkly humorous, is because the biggest part of this story, that there's 2 parts. The fact that his wife left him for the world's smallest man, and then left the world's smallest man going back to the lobster man. She's got a thing for circus acts, I guess. I don't know. And the fact that only 10 people showed up to his funeral, which is sad, don't get me wrong. But it really shows the kind of guy he was. And it's almost understandable at why Mary wanted something to be done about it. Maybe, most likely, she shouldn't have gone about it in the way that she did. But what else can you do in that situation? She was abused for years by him, and often led to physical harm. And so I guess she felt like that was the only way out. But one thing I forgot to add is that he passed away in 1992. Yeah, I forgot to add that earlier. So he was around for a while, 1937 to 1992. I think he was about 55 when he died. Yeah, I think if my math's right, he was around there. But yeah, so not super young, not super old though, but he had a lot of time to build up his reputation. Anyway, that's it for this story. I'm glad to be back. I know this one was a little bit more rambly, I guess. I don't know. But I hope you guys enjoy this episode and found something interesting. And maybe, hopefully you've never heard this story before. That's my goal with a lot of these stories, is to tell the ones that no one's ever heard and the ones that I think deserve to be in the history books. So hopefully you guys learned something, and I hope to see you in the next one. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more quickly, and see you guys.